I just want to say thank you to everyone. Always, I want to just throw a shout out always to, anyone who's connecting with the things that I'm talking about. I meet people and they'll say, hey man, I listen to your podcast and I really love the way, you speak from your heart. I mean, that to me is such a beautiful thing from what I do. Like this is the thing I care about the most, is just connecting with my brothers and sisters and creating a space where we can talk about difficult things. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to approach addiction. 80% of homes these days are experiencing mental health or addiction in their immediate or extended families. We're going to talk about addiction from a couple of different perspectives, because when I use the word addiction, many of us immediately associate with fentanyl, methamphetamines, crack, coke, drug addiction, or something more socially acceptable as becoming an alcoholic. But the other side of addiction that we don't too often talk about is that of cell phone use, social media. A lot of the children are experiencing an immense disconnection from each other and their families. So I think it's really important to talk about addiction from a couple of different perspectives, because I want to really for you to see how much in common aspects of addiction that we all have. Because, when we talk about addiction from, say, a drug perspective, well, someone who's got a child that's completely addicted to the cell phone and social media won't find any association because of the label that's used within a drug addict. But the psychological behavior and patterns created of addiction are the same. So the experiences that get us to this avenue to be consumed by something to distract from ourselves may be different, but the practice in psychological behaviors and patterns of thinking are the exact same. And I really want people to understand that that's where the real function of addiction is taking place. And I know I've just explained that a few times in a couple different ways, but I did that to really bring an awareness to that association, because we like to look at our situations as being less or more than other people, because it allows us to find comfort in our current situation. And I want us to really find an equality within this struggle that we are facing within mental health and addiction within many, many lives. I mean, the more we can connect over this subject, like the more communication that is going to take place between individuals who have common experiences taking place in their lives. I mean, that's how we learn from each other. And a big part of addiction is it's very taboo to talk about from a parental or a loved one's perspective that is not in active addiction. I mean, the conversations that need to take place to allow an individual to process what they're going through with a loved one needs to happen. And when that becomes taboo to talk about, it begins to evolve into fear, anxiety, and stress, and a discomfort and a disconnection into one's life. So one that may not even be experiencing addiction is still experiencing the effects of addiction based on the miscommunication that is taking place in their lives surrounding their feelings. Because let's be real, addiction is an inability to process emotions or difficult experiences as a result of an emotional trauma. That's what it is. But let's talk about emotional traumas. Because for many of us, when I talk about an emotional trauma, we immediately associate to physical and sexual abuse, which absolutely is traumatic to a human being and takes place very common within the lives of our brothers and sisters today. 1 in 3 women is sexually abused. So we need to really have conversations surrounding emotional traumas as well when we're talking about addiction, because it's my belief, with 23 years of practice within active addiction and learning about psychology within my brothers and sisters that were experiencing the same thing around me, I came to learn that the core root of the attachment to harm oneself using substances or things external from us to mask symptoms of an internal problem was exactly what was taking place. The drugs or the alcohol or the gambling or the sex or this, whatever it may be, was there to help distract from feelings on the inside that we're uncomfortable to feel. And really, we're not given the tools and the education of how to talk about these feelings. We don't have individuals in our communities that step up and become leaders, and they lead by example to show individuals that, hey, we can experience difficult things in this life, but we can talk about them to heal from them. So that's a big part of what is happening within addiction. And I kind of slowed my talk there when I was talking about gambling, drug use, and alcoholism, because I was going to talk about social media use as having the same effect on individuals, and I want to talk about that right now. The use of social medias and cell phone is so commonly practiced because individuals are looking for something within these devices. The tool of having a cell phone and having the internet and having all of these apps is just that. It's a tool. It comes with a responsibility, absolutely. But I own one of these tools as well, and I'm not completely addicted, and I'm not completely consumed by any of the social media apps I have, and or the algorithms that they try to create on me. They don't have an attachment to me because I do not practice using these social media tools for anything that is not good for me. I create content and I put content up. But those are content creators. The other aspect, the other 90% of people are consuming content. So what is it that they're looking for within these devices? They're searching for something within themselves inside of these devices. And it's become completely socially acceptable to do this because we have many examples of adults that are completely addicted to cell phones or social media use to look for something inside of it to distract from an uncomfortable feeling within. Because we're trying to connect to things using this device, except it completely disconnects us from ourselves. And that's where the true value is found, is within ourselves. But navigating this personal journey or personal understanding of self is difficult because we don't have community leaders or examples or conversations that are happening in such a readily available manner, which is why I do this podcast. I want to be one of these individuals that does talk about these things, that does see things from another perspective and says, hey, this is the reality we're living in, but we have an opportunity to change it. And if you're a parent and you are witnessing your child completely consumed by the cell phone, first off, I want you to take a look at your life and really evaluate how much you use your phone and how normal it is to practice using social media apps. And if that is a way that you choose to see your identity and put your identity out for the world is done through that applicational value that you find within yourself. Because if you find that within yourself as a guide, as a teacher to these little humans, to these children that are going to become adults, that we see practice these behaviors, we've got to look at where they're learning it from. Now, it may not be us, but if it is, we can be accountable in our lives. And that way we can have a common association or a communication with our children that they'll relate to. Because we can say, hey, I've been practicing this in my life, consumed by social media, where I feel I need to put my life online so that people can see this identity of me that quite possibly might not be my true authentic self. You can have that conversation with your children to say, hey, this isn't good for you. Because I can see how these behaviors are creating a pattern in your mind that have you feel like you're creating a connection with people you don't know. And then you feel you need to keep up this identity that you've displayed to people that don't know you so that you can be liked, or that you can be seen, or that you can be heard. Because that's really important. Kids are just trying to be seen and trying to be heard. And these days, with the cost of living and the complete distraction due to the social acceptability of cell phone use, they are more desperate than ever to be seen and heard, yet they're finding the same value within the consumption of using the phone because that's what they see their loved ones doing so often. So, that's a big result of what's happening with these tools as well, is the ability to be seen and the ability to be heard. You can become someone. You can have that attention, even if it's from people that don't know you. Likes and views have more value than authentic connections in the world. And that's something that's been practiced. And we've had less conversations surrounding the importance of being authentic and being truthful. And we found more value in, YouTubers or content creators that might be pretending to be people they're not, or teaching the kids values that are not good for them, right? Like, not that they're not good for them, but they're not beneficial to their personal growth. And that to me is everything. Like, if we're assessing personal growth from a human evolutionary state, like, that's the conversation we got to be having. And that's the conversation that I do have. And that's why I have them. That's why I talk this way. Because it's important that we can see the power that we have in our lives to approach these things called addiction. Or really, they're just distractions. They're distractions from an inability to communicate and connect with ourselves. Because once we connect with ourselves, we really see how easy it is to connect with those around us, because we've done the work on ourselves, and we realize we can see that in other people. It's a direct reflection of ourselves. So it's important for us to become examples, to become leaders, by being the example, by taking action to try new things and have difficult conversations with the people we love, and really open up a space for communication to happen in this manner. I mean, addiction is practiced because you found an ability to hide. And when you find an avenue to hide from yourself in areas where there's still many people, it becomes comfortable. And that's practiced, that behavior. As far as drug use goes, when approaching an individual with drug use, it's the same understanding. I just cannot stress to you enough how important it is to see a human for a human rather than a label. When we look at individuals such as junkies or homeless or all these mental health labels that people are given these days, it's really important to get to know the story, the name of the individual that we're trying to learn about, free from any label that anybody has given them. Because once we start to really listen to the individual, we'll learn about the experiences that have brought them to act the way they act. And that's a point of reference for us to really begin a healing process. Now, we can't change anyone. Anyone who's approaching anyone in addiction, we need to understand. Even children using cell phones, we have to allow them to make these decisions on their own, because that's the only way they're going to value it and make change, is if they feel excited or inspired enough to change the situation that they're in. That's really important. No one's going to save anyone, but we can guide an individual to self-worth by being the example. So that's really important with drug use and alcohol and things like this, because your level of confidence and worth is just debilitated. Many people within addiction struggle to understand their worth and their value. And I think this is really important when we're talking about this, because rather than talking about an addict, we can talk about an individual who's confused with their self-worth and value. Now imagine we talked about it in that way, and we removed the whole concept of a label. Self-worth and value are something we all understand in our lives. And it creates a new conversation, because we can say, oh, in my life too, I've struggled with seeing myself as finding value or finding my purpose in this life. That's another big thing, is that people struggle to find their purpose. They don't feel like they fit into society due to the result that they were not seen and not heard, because their value was diminished based on their intelligence in school. And that intelligence was not able to grow into the awareness that it could have been due to the result of an emotional experience that has them caught in an emotional repetitive cycle. They're trying to distract from a feeling that's uncomfortable because it cannot be processed. Very important information right there. Because once we learn that, we can say, okay, I can approach this differently. I may not have all the answers, but I certainly have been sad in my life, and I've been alone, and I've been afraid, and I've been scared, and I've been confused, and I've been frustrated. And I definitely know, what it means to be angry as the result of things that have happened out of my control. Because we've all felt that. So somebody who's in active addiction, they just repeat this cycle on a day-to-day basis. And then they use the drugs or alcohol or whatever it is externally to mask that feeling from feeling that emotional repetitive cycle. So that's a great way to build a relatable association with an individual that may be experiencing addiction and your own personal life. I think that that's a tool you can use to really approach this, is to really see it from that perspective. Now, talking about anger, like anger is just another feeling that distracts from an uncomfortable feeling within, right? Like some people within alcohol abuse or drug abuse or whatever it may be, just mental health, they use anger as a form, an outlet to release energy. And it creates a feeling so that they don't have to feel those uncomfortable feelings, right? They're still distracting from an unprocessed emotion or an unprocessed emotional trauma that took place in their life, but they became angry from it. So that anger now serves a function in their day-to-day life, where that's a tool, an outlet to let go of energy and really function within society, much like a heroin user would take heroin every day. Being angry and finding ways to project that anger onto other individuals has become a drug. And a lot of people are angry these days, and we struggle to connect with that and understand how to connect with that. For individuals who are also experiencing this connection with individuals within active addiction, whatever the addiction looks like, having the understanding that we're not going to save anyone, we'll really find our place within the relationship. Now, I know it's difficult when it's a loved one within a family. My mother and father had not just me as a drug addict, but others as well in my family, and we were very close. But it was very difficult for them to create boundaries because they loved us so much, and they thought that feeding us money all the time would save us and protect us and keep us safe. But once my mother finally cut me off, it was at that point that I actually really knew that I had to make change on my own, because I had somebody enabling me. And it wasn't anything that my mother didn't do out of love, It was very, very difficult for my mother. Anyone that's got a child or a loved one in active addiction, they understand the level of difficulty that you're participating with. And even with a child with cell phone, trying to get through to a child that's completely glued to a device all the time, it becomes very frustrating because you don't know what to do. And you just do the best you can. And with a child that's addicted to a cell phone or video games, or things like this, you feed them, you clothe them, you give them water, you create an environment that allows them to be within their active use. That's enabling. And that's really what it looks like. So you really got to challenge your place and really your understanding of helping a loved one. Now, even with children, life's got to get a little difficult for them. They're not paying for their internet bill. They're not paying for these devices. You're paying for it. So, really having conversations surrounding what is transpiring is a great way for them to see their role in what's taking place and your role. It allows people to become accountable. So, for example, if you're feeding an addict money to enable their addiction, you really have to ask yourself, are you the one that made the choice to be in active addiction on a day-to-day basis? Or was that another individual's choice? Was that a part of their journey? Because all of us are on our own journey. We're all experiencing life as the result of our own choices and our own consequences. That's really what's taking place. There's no blame and victim mentality in life. There can't be. All of the choices that we choose to make are of our own making, which allows us to create our own reality. But if we're making choices that may not be beneficial to another individual because we think that's out of love, but yet it hurts them, we're helping to create that reality for them. So I know that that's a difficult thing to perceive and to be a part of, but you've got to be accountable in your role of being a part of an individual's life who is in active addiction. And I think that that's a really great place to be, is to have an awareness surrounding what you're doing. Now, on the other side of that, what can you offer an individual who's in active addiction? You can be open to love. Love is the most beautiful thing that is a requirement in this life. Now, many of us that are in active addiction, we are so far away from love. But to have an example of love in your life that you have an open line of communication to at any given time is priceless. My mother did that to me. She at one point had to come, like I made my parents' life a living hell. I'm not going to even try and sugarcoat it any which way. I mean, 23 years as a drug addict. I was addicted to hair. I was addicted to all the drugs, and I spent 16 years with a needle. So that just means the severity of my addiction was quite high, and the need and the demand to have drugs to cope with a physical addiction became just an everyday constant thing. And that's just because I wasn't able to communicate about feelings and experiences that I had gone through in my life. So I practiced active addiction because I knew how to do that. I had learned and taught myself these habits that became patterns and routines, and then they became addictions, which I would practice on a day-to-day basis. Until I was reached a point in my life where I had become homeless for years, but I had gone to jail. And when I took things that weren't mine, of course, I was an addict. I was trying to fill this void within myself. I'm not proud of it, but I certainly paid my time, and I had to do what I had to do. But when I got out of jail and I had found a new way of life, I had surrendered my love to Jesus. And what that meant was I had surrendered my life to love. There's a lot of power within the energy that Jesus left on this planet, because Jesus was an example of love. And I was reading a book by an individual who had a similar life as mine, and he had surrendered his love to Jesus. And in that moment, I was homeless. I'd lost my children. I'd lost everything. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to speak these words into the air and see what happens. But I really had nothing, and I had no one. And I guess I had found my bottom. Because it brought me to speak words that I had no connection with. I didn't even know why I did it, but I really was grateful that I did, because when I did, the interesting thing that happened to me was that tools like compassion, empathy, love, and forgiveness were shown to me in a way that I knew how to use them. So I was able to go into my past, into very, very far back into my childhood. And I was able to heal the experiences and the emotions that I carried for so long, using tools of compassion, tools of empathy, tools of kindness. And the most important one was forgiveness. So I forgave myself for everything that I had done. And then I forgave everyone for all the things that they had done to me. Because I knew in that moment that I was not my past. It was certainly a part of my present, but it did not define me anymore, because I chose to be someone different in the present moment. But I had to get there through the extreme difficulties. And had my mother kept feeding me money, I would have remained an addict, because I just would have got out of jail. I would have figured it out, and I would have, created some story that I would have got money. But she cut me off. And it was a beautiful thing. And my parents were in no position to be giving me money all the time. I mean, good Lord, my mother's still working today as the result of my actions, because she was there, giving me so much money all the time. And I walk with that today. And my mother and I are so close. I mean, she is one of my best friends. She's a true love and light in this planet. She's an angel. My mother is the example of what an angel is to me. And I look to Jesus as being the same thing. Jesus was an example of the love and the light. Religion has created another idea of what Jesus is, but to me, how I see it, I just see him as a man who had less, but he carried so much more, because the love and the light through his truth and authenticity was what was able to change people's lives. So I lead by that example today. And I was able to find that on my own. Now, I don't paraphrase scriptures. I don't know anything. I know very little about the Bible, and church for me is not a building with a symbol at the top of it. It's out here in the lands with my brothers and sisters, and I lead by example by taking action. And I have used tools like kindness, self-love, and self-care, and I practice my emotional understanding of myself on a day-to-day basis. And I had to do that by finding an extreme difficulty, but because I had lines of communication opened up to me with people that were examples of love in their own lives, that helped me grow when I needed it the most. So what does that mean for you? So for you, your practice does not come in carrying the emotional baggage or the emotional weight of the loved one in active addictions experience as your own. That's not for you to carry. That's for that individual to carry. For you, You've got to be the example of love. So your practice of self-love and self-care and understanding in your role of what it means to be there for a loved one dictated through the cultivation of love within yourself. Because to give another individual love, we must first have love for self. And you really got to understand that, because when they need you the most, you've got to be strong. You've got to be strong for them to come to you, and you got to be able to carry some of that weight. But when you're walking in the experience of addiction on a day-to-day basis, of course you're drained. Of course you're tired. Of course you have zero time for yourself because you're carrying someone else's experience that's out of your control. All we can do is take action in our own life to be an example. And the more action we take and the more of it an example we become, the more light we transmit in dark places. And the individuals that we love that are in active addiction, they always can see that light no matter how dark it is, because it's a beacon for them, you know? And that's not just for the loved ones that we have around us. That becomes for everyone around you. You become the example. And communicating about experiences that are difficult in your life because you do not fear judgment by others, that's for you. You first have to not judge yourself. Many people that have loved ones within active addiction, they feel a great responsibility that it's their fault. And I can promise you it's not your fault, because no matter what happened throughout the course of parenting, there is no manual for parenting. So there's no right or wrongs, you know, and we're certainly not taught how to be parents within schools. And the understanding of what it means to be a parent typically comes from those that raised us. And they never had a manual for parenting as well. So it's important to see that. But if there are things in your life that you can become accountable for, that's your healing process. That's how you can heal in your life. And the more you heal within your life, you can share that with the loved one that may be in active addiction when the time is right. And you'll know when that time is right because honest conversations will present themselves. There will be an emotional balance within two individuals' lives that'll really see an opportunity to share the work that we've done. So try not to carry any regret, shame, or guilt for the things that have transpired because they've already happened. We just have to find education in the experience to share with others to help them along their way. That way, it's not really a mistake or something we have to regret. It turns into something beautiful because we can share it to help other people in their lives. 80% of people are experiencing mental health or addiction in their immediate or extended families. So never before has your difficult experiences and your struggles in life been more valuable to society. You know, and it's really important for me to share that to you like that, because I want you to see that, you know, there's always a positive within the negative. We just have to remove the judgment aspect that we hold over ourselves and the fear of others, because there's 8 billion people on the planet. You know, people be struggling. If they want to pretend that everything's okay, that's for them. We don't need to judge individuals like that. But how do you step out in the world? You know, do you step in the world carrying the emotional baggage of fear, shame, regret, guilt? Like if you're carrying that when you leave the house in the morning or when you wake up in the morning, assess that. Find areas in your life that need healing, and you can do that using tools of compassion, kindness, understanding, and forgiveness. We make mistakes in this life, and they lead us to challenging consequences, but those consequences have beauty inside of them, and there's education there for us to get back up and try again. It doesn't matter how far along the journey you are. I was 36 before I decided to stop falling down over the same friggin' lesson I was trying to learn. What I learned, though, was after I'd overcome this lesson of falling down and getting back up again over my drug use due to an emotional trauma and unprocessed emotions that took place a long, long time ago, I experienced new challenges in my life. Because making mistakes in life is a part of life. It's just how quickly we learn from them. And I just use my life as an example of what it means to share about that and how we can connect with each other. And that's why I created this podcast, is because it's beautiful to me to be able to have difficult conversations surrounding difficult topics that are happening in so many lives right now. You know, so we all have so much value to offer the world. It's just whether or not we're willing to step out and speak our truth and be authentic. And if you feel that people are judging you for the things that you're talking about, then that's just a community that doesn't see your value, because your truth and your authenticity is priceless. It's got to come from a place of love. We don't want to, blame and victimize other people when we're speaking our truth and being authentic. We certainly have to understand that everyone's experiences are their own experiences and everyone's on their own journey. So we can't judge another or try and put our belief systems on another. We just speak the truth that's held within our heart. And when that comes from a place of love, it's very authentic. And it's very beautiful in its delivery because it understands that delivery method, We don't have to be stuck inside of judgmental ideologies. So I just want to share that with you because people, when we're talking about speaking truth and being authentic, we really got to understand how we do that. We haven't practiced. We haven't practiced speaking our truth and becoming authentic, which is why it's so hard for people to connect, which is why it's so hard for the kids to connect. This is a big reason why they're stuck inside of these devices. It's because they're afraid to be their true authentic selves. They're so afraid to be judged and they're so afraid not to be accepted because they have not accepted themselves. And that's really important to understand. And it's okay if that's happening in your life. It's absolutely fine. But it's because it's an opportunity for you to become aware of what's transpiring in a child's life or an avenue to open up a line of communication. Now, they may put up a wall with you. Of course, your mom and dad, you come with all these labels and all these ideologies. They don't want to let you in. You got to appreciate that. And how do you associate with that? Take a look at yourself and your life. What were you like with your parents? Now, if your parents you were very open with your parents and inviting, take a look at how your parents were parenting you and use some of those examples in your life to get through to your child. The best way to get through to a child is by being vulnerable. Show them that you're human. Show them that you're not this hierarchy or this title of mom and dad. Allow them to see that you make mistakes in life and you don't have it all figured out. The more authentic you become with these children, the more they'll open up to you. I do this in my life. This is what I do. I love connecting with kids and they open up so quickly to me because they just see how I am. They hear me. There's nothing they got to be afraid of being, They'll let me in a little bit by opening up about something they're feeling, and then I'll go a little deeper into that. And they kind of look at me and they're like, you really want to know how I'm feeling? It's like, I really want to know how you're feeling. You know why I want to know how you're feeling? Because I felt like shit in my life too, And I felt like I had to hide from these feelings, and I've been afraid, and I've been alone, and I've been scared, and I haven't always been accepted, and somebody picked on me when I was a kid. I get it. I've been through this shit, and we all have in some way, in some form. So remember, your experience is so valuable when you're approaching addiction, but more so when you're approaching life. Mental health is the result of, thought processes that are not well for us. It's created out of this practice of disconnecting from ourselves. And because we talk to ourselves more than we talk to others, we can create patterns that are not good for our well-being. So mental health is grown in practice in ways that others feel like it needs to be medicated. But I feel like the medication is love. We just need to learn how to use the prescription. And communication is the key. So I appreciate you for listening to my thoughts and my feelings and my heart. Because everything I just shared with you right there is just from my heart. And, I know sometimes in the episodes I don't cover all of the things because I just give you a stream of consciousness. I literally just sat down in front of the microphone and I said to my wife before, I'm like, oh, what should I do this podcast episode on? And I just cultivate a feeling within myself of what I want to talk about and I go with it. So I know sometimes I don't cover all the things, but I'm trying to be better at giving examples of the things that I'm talking about so people can practice that in their own life. Because I feel like that practice is everything, right? That's where we find the true value is. Give me something to try in my life. And that's the other thing. Please do not be afraid to try new things. It may be difficult to speak your truth and be an example in someone's life or in your own life of what you want to be. But please practice. Your practice is far more valuable than consuming a whole bunch of information. I know people that just take in so many books and then they feel like they don't get any results. But I ask them, how much did you practice of the first book that you read? or the first podcast episode that you listen to. You know, that's the whole thing with everything I do is I give a podcast episode a week, and then I allow you to sit with that and practice it. And the podcast episode is cut up into clips, and I post it on my social media. So you have something to relate to throughout the week to remind you of your practice, and that way we can connect. So, you know, leave me comments, leave me likes, like and subscribe to this if you liked it. And please let me know, you know, anything that you'd like to hear, an episode you'd like me to do. If there's a guest you'd like me to have on, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there so we can connect in a virtual way, but somehow have it be a little more personal so I can do things that people want to grow from. Like, because that's what I'm all about. And I talk about the things that I'm feeling for sure. But there's a lot of feelings that are happening in the world that I'd like to appreciate and grow with as well, and bring in awareness to. So, you know, let's open that line of communication up. My social media is Real Talk for an Unreal World. That's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify. All my podcast channels are under that name. And if you just like and follow my stuff, it just helps the algorithms boost into the system. I personally don't spend too much time on social media. I just upload my content and I put it into the world. But the more people that can pull information from the things that I talk about and connect with it will help them to heal. And that's all I care about. Popularity and you know, incurring an immense amount of money is not what I'm about. It's the evolution of love that I'm here for. So help me with that, because we are a community and we can do this together. And talk about this with friends. If you feel like, you know, there's something in the episode that someone can connect with, just send them the episode. You know, just send them the link and say, check this out, or whatever it may be, right? Because there's a lot of people experiencing mental health and addiction that don't have an avenue to communicate about it, or they feel like it's taboo. So you can do that in your life. My Twitter is Real Talk, 4 Unreal. My Gmail is realtalkforanunrealworld@gmail.com. I have a whole new platform that's opening up. Basically, it's just a website, but I've started a public speaking company where I'm being brought into schools and corporations and industries to have real conversations about mental health and addiction and how we can, you know, evolve through this together, because this is the way I talk, because this is who I am. This is what I stand for. So I really am an example of what I believe in this life, and I'm okay to talk about it. I really am. So even if you feel like you got some questions or something you got on your mind that you need to see another way, or you want to talk to somebody who has a perspective on addiction, please reach out to me. I've had people send me very beautiful emails, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But this is something I do. I care about connection, so I make time for that. But as always, much love for your practice. Much love for being here at a very difficult time, but it's so beautiful because we are at the end of something. We are experiencing the end of a very egotistical era on this planet, and we are evolving into love. And it's very difficult to be a part of that great transition because we've come to such a dark place. But the light always has such a high vibrational frequency, it penetrates all of the darkness. So, you know, really congratulate yourself for coming back here and offer yourself gratitude to carry the emotional vibrations that come with a very dense era on this planet at this time. And, you know, if you're following my podcast on Spotify or anything like that, it's all there to help you grow. So much love. I appreciate you guys.